Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. So my name is Phil Schuman. I'm the Executive Director of the Higher Education Financial Wellness Alliance. We're based out of Indiana University, so home of, I feel like contractually obligated to always introduce myself as like home of a football championship team, because we still don't know how to deal with that here. So for a few more months, I get to have an ego regarding that. But then afterwards, we'll probably lose again and we'll get relegated into the losing territory. Anyway, it's really nice to be here. I appreciate Intuit for the invitation to talk here and also for their support of some of the work that we've been doing over the course of the past year. In partnership with them and then the National Endowment for Financial Education, we brought together some higher education leaders over the course of the past year and sort of asked them what is it that they need to see in order to invest more in financial wellness in higher ed. And undoubtedly, like the resounding answer was basically we need research that's telling us that financial wellness and teaching financial wellness and addressing it with students is going to impact student success, that we're going to have better retention rates, better graduation rates. We're going to see decrease in student borrowing. We're going to see all of these things together. And what they also said is in order to get to that place, we needed to be able to build out some competencies. We needed to be building out what is it that students need to know about finances. Um, in order to be able to determine whether or not this is actually having that positive effect that we believe that it does. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a few moments, but just a little bit of background. HEFWA in various forms has existed over the course of the past 10 years. We exist out of Indiana University. We've been a part of the university administration for quite some time as we were running the IU Money Smarts program here. What HEFWA is sort of the way that we connect with other universities across the country to discuss financial wellness and how we can implement it and what kinds of things are needed in order to get institutions to buy into it more. I assume everybody who's on this call believes that financial wellness is that path to student success, or certainly a critical component to student success. And what we're trying to do is build out that professional development piece. We're trying to build out the research and the proof that what we're focused on here is a thing that's going to impact student success in a very positive way moving forward. So some of the things that we do, if you're not familiar with us, we have a financial education platform cash course, which if you're not familiar that we have it, you might be familiar with the National Endowment for Financial Education. Started that platform back in 2007. We took it over in 2020. We've made some updates to it since then, but it is the tool that we provide to our member universities to allow them to give financial education to their students. We also do professional development for staff. I have a great self-promoting promotion here at the end talking about our conference that's next month. But we really try and provide tools and resources for staff trying to address financial wellness at their institutions to better help them support their students who are facing financial wellness issues. So within there, like I said, we've got these tools and resources. And what we're trying to do now is build out these competencies, and I'll show you these here in a few moments about what is it that students need to know as it relates to finances. What I will say too, and I know we have a short amount of time here, is that I will present these to you in as short as way as I possibly can. But part of the reason why we're doing this session today is not to tell you that what we have here is a fixed product, but we want to get your feedback as well. I've been closely working with Intuit on this, and they're just as interested to hear what the feedback is. And I'll give you some of the feedback that we've already gotten, and you can take it from there as well. But as I've said time and time again, the sessions that I've said in so far, it seems like we're all pretty unified in the idea that financial wellness is a student success issue. And what we've sort of outlined so far is there are these different decision-making points that students face regarding their finances prior to when they come to college, while they're in college, and then even afterwards as well. You know, higher ed is sort of very interesting in the instance that people talk about the return on investment in higher ed and whether or not it's affordable. But in a lot of cases, you won't know that higher ed's not affordable until 20 years after you graduate. I say this as a person who is now, unfortunately, 20 years past graduating from college, who was a social worker 5 years after graduating from college, making $24,000 a year with a 4-year private liberal arts degree. If you would have come to me and asked, "Hey, Phil, was your degree worth it?" I would have told you no. But here we are 20 years later, and I could say that it was. And I wish I would have had some of this information along the way that would have helped sort of put it in perspective as I went along. But all this is to say that we sort of used this like this sort of trajectory here on this slide to help us figure out what those decision-making points and how they can sort of help us build out these competencies as part of what we're trying to do. And I think as a lot of you know, what today's challenges are is that students cite finances as one of the top reasons why they are dropping out of school or stopping out of school. What we've also seen within our field is there's no consistent definition of financial wellness. And it exists in the higher ed space. We're trying to define it in the higher ed space. But we also will see financial institutions across the country utilize the term financial wellness, but in a way that sort of indicates that they're trying to sell their products. And what we're trying to do, and again, with the help of Intuit, with the help of NEFI, is trying to redefine financial wellness and make sure that we're getting people to look at it in a way that's holistic and what benefits them the most, and not as a means to try and get them to do things that we might not want them to do from a financial standpoint. And then what we're also seeing too is that these efforts are fragmented, hard to scale. Um, Unsurprisingly, with all the cuts to higher ed that are happening at the moment, we're seeing a lot of institutions starting to defund or not fund as much the financial wellness programs. And that's partially because, the research isn't there to say that this is directly impacting student success. And so we have a lot of people who are trying to do more with less. And what we're trying to do from a HEFWA standpoint is be that pillar, that guide, and just that support that can help them do the things that they need to do. Where we realize there's opportunity is that we need to be able to define what students should know and be able to do. We know that institutions need access to these curriculums, performance-based assessments, basically to find out whether or not what they're teaching is actually impacting students in a positive way. We want to help try and find a way to make financial wellness just a term that is understood in the higher ed space and that every institution is focused on trying to implement it. And then also work together with other institutions and with our partners to figure out how we can scale what it is we're doing and ensure that every institution is addressing it in a way that best represents their students. So with all that said, I told you that last year, starting in October, we got into a room with a bunch of higher ed leaders, ourselves, NEFI, Intuit, and we talked with these higher ed leaders about what is it they want to see to make financial wellness work in the higher ed space. And again, one of those recommendations came out is that they wanted to see some competencies. They wanted to see some guidance about what it is that we thought that students needed to know about finances so that we could start researching it, measuring it, and determining whether or not it was having a positive impact on student success. And so what I'm going to show you here in a few seconds is where we're at right now. Actually, I think, Carol, you put it in the chat a little bit ago, or no, it was Lynn. My apologies. Lynn put it in the chat that we're going to be debuting these next month at our conference. And so we've got a month between now and then to sort of finalize the things as they are and show you all that this is what we're up to. And this is what we believe institutions need to be teaching students as it relates to finances. And so where we're at this moment, so we have 4 different domains, and I'll show you what those are. 19 different competencies in total within those 4 domains. 3 progression levels, and I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the feedback we've gotten there, but where we're at from a positioning standpoint. And then obviously with 3 progression levels, 19 competencies, we have 57 different descriptors that define what it is that students need to know about finances in each of those spaces. So with that said, from information to financial capacity. So what we are trying to do here, and I saw the question there a few seconds ago that popped up on my screen that said, how do we determine, or how do we differentiate between financial wellness and financial well-being? I'll show you that as it relates to our competencies in there. To us, they're almost the same. And we could spend hours trying to debate like the little differences between the two. We're trying to get people unified around a term. So in the sense of wellness, to us, wellness is probably going to be the same. And I'm going to probably over exaggerate a little bit here, but like wellness is going to be the same as well-being might be to you. We're just trying to get that term that we can use as an umbrella term, bring in what other people might use as well-being, as capability, as capacity, like all these different things, and just get it into one term at the moment. And that goes to that shared language piece that's number 1. We're trying to build out this student development map as well so that we know what students need to know prior to school, during school, after school as well. And then build out this curriculum, coaching, and assessment that goes along with it. And then also helping institutions be able to provide access to navigation supports I heard in the last session talking about emergency aid, talking about basic needs, talking about community assistance programs as well, like making sure that students understand all of those things exist in their world, and they could be steps to help them with their student success. And so the four domains that we've come up with, we've spent a lot of time. We've gone, Caleb, I think we went from 8 to 5 to now 4 is where we're at. Carol, I don't know if you've seen this since we've last talked. I see you guys on my screen, so I'm kind of having fun looking at your reactions and getting to talk about this in front of you. So where we're at the moment, the first domain is this financial influences in decision making. And in a sense, that's the psychological piece of finances to us. And sort of how does your background play a role in your financial lives and how you make decisions? And we want people to better understand those. The second one is financial management stability. So this is the one I think we always think about. We talk about budgeting, we talk about credit, debt, how to bank properly, and just making financial decisions like on a daily basis. That's that second domain. The third domain is this financial planning and future readiness. So this is talking about making sure that your financial decisions are aligning with what your goals are, how to transition between pre-college to college, how to transition from college to career, how to plan for things like buying a home, buying a car, risks. So talking about even gambling and talking about what we've seen lately with the prediction markets, investing, retirement, making sure that people understand those things effectively as well. And then the final one is what we're calling informed financial consumer and systems navigation. So basically, do you understand what supports exist in your world and how to navigate them? But then also too, how to protect yourself. If we talk about identity theft, this would be a thing here. And so what I kind of think about with this domain is it's sort of like building that mechanism inside a person's head that makes them question the decisions that they're making as it relates to finances. Oops, I don't know if I did that, but here we go. So within that, these three levels of growing confidence, so these competency levels that we have here. So we have them. I'm going to tell you how we've thought of them, but then I'm also going to tell you the feedback that we've gotten so far and the reason why we're probably going to shift this around a little bit. Like I said, this is still a work in progress, but I think you'll be able to see where we're sort of going with this. So the first level, so within each competency, there's going to be these three levels that's going to tell a person this is the first part of it. And then once you finish that, it'll go to the second to the third. At the basic level, we are calling it foundational literacy, or we could even call this just financial literacy, which is basically saying the thing that we need people to know about each of these competencies, first and foremost, is what does it mean? If we're talking about budgeting, we're talking about what is a budget, how to build a budget, what goes into it. If we're talking about debt, we're talking about the different types of debt that exist out there. How do you navigate those pieces of debt? How do they apply to you in different situations? We're just saying you understand the knowledge component of this competency. From there, we are saying the next level is the capability. And to us, that means skills. So if foundational literacy is just knowledge, capability is the knowledge plus skills. So at that point, we're saying that people understand how they are taking this knowledge about, say, a budget, and they're building one. They're building one that reflects who they are as a person, and they're able to put that together. And we're saying that is the second level, this knowledge plus the implementation of skills. So for us, those two things make a lot of sense to sort of scaffold, knowledge plus skills. But the last one, so we're calling financial wellness. We might play around with the terminology a little bit about this. But in this case, what we're saying here is access to resources, right? So if you have the knowledge and skills, that's great. But if we're talking about student success and how like each of these competencies applies, you're less likely to have success if you don't have access to the resources that allow you to put this knowledge and skills together, right? So what we're saying, what financial wellness in each of these competencies to us is knowledge plus skills plus access to resources, whether or not that's personal, whether or not it's being able to reach out to people to get access to the things you might need in those situations. And the reason why we've gotten some feedback on this one is it makes sense to scaffold each of these. But once you get to financial wellness, The problem is that financial wellness is not always a given. It's also a spectrum in the sense of you might have access to those resources at one moment, but they also could be taken away for various reasons at the end. And we could look at like if a student faces a medical debt issue or like a medical issue at some point during school, well, just because they're financial wellness at that, they might have financial wellness in that moment, doesn't mean that it's going to stay there because that medical debt could kick them back. And so we have to figure out a way to account for just the flexibility, the malleability of what might happen to a person who has access to resources at one moment, but might get taken away later. But the theory we're trying to posit with all of this here is that a person who has knowledge and skills is going to be more likely to have success than a person who just has knowledge or just has nothing as it relates to these competencies. And certainly a person who has access to knowledge, skills, and resources is going to be more likely to graduate or to be retained year to year. So we're working on trying to get this structured right now so that we can start researching it and putting it together so that we can show that students understanding these competencies, and I'll put them here now, understanding each of these competencies is going to be more likely to be successful than a student who doesn't have access to these or who hasn't met these competencies. And so I'm just going to leave these up here for a few seconds because this is the second to last slide I have here. And just let you take a look at these because it's a lot of information. We did some focus groups a couple of weeks ago, and people told us it was a lot of information to take in at once. We are aware of it's a lot of information for us to be able to pass along as well. But like I said, part of the reason why we're here is to get some feedback from you all about what you think about this. If you see any sorts of gaps that we might be missing in here, what are we not thinking about as we get ready to take this public next month? So I don't know if there have been questions so far, but I'm happy to start answering those or happy to start collecting feedback as well.
Yeah, if you want to drop questions in the chat, one comment, I feel like adding life enjoyment and peer comparison could be added. Thoughts on that, Phil?
I like that idea. I think you'd find that in financial influence and decision making. So, especially if we're thinking about peer comparison, that's influences. So, that cultural and relational context, I think we'll probably include some stuff in there about that. And the other thing I'll say too, and it's kind of hard, is like within each of these, we've already sort of mapped out what each of the levels looks like. And so you'll look at some of this and be like, oh, I don't see much about financial aid in here. Financial aid does exist in within this framework. We might try and call it out a little bit more than what's there, but I think that's sort of it. Is that like we've got a lot of these topics embedded within these competencies right now, but we might try and bring them a little bit more to the forefront.
Perfect. Couple other questions. Mark asks, are there assignments, assessments for each of the competencies?
That's one of the things that we're working on. But I will also say too, what we're trying to do with these is not necessarily say like we're going to build these out and then HEF was going to provide all the resources under the sun that you'll be able to take to your school. We're going to try and do as much of that as we can, but we're also trying to do this to provide guidance to financial institutions as well, or anybody who's interested in delivering financial education, so that they have a framework that they can start working with and build content around that and allow any institution to be able to use those as well. One of the reasons why we're doing it this way is because like on the K through 12 side, like there's a lot of disjointedness with how it's all put together. Like there are a lot of different models that exist. And what we've noticed in the higher ed space is that there isn't really there hasn't really been a model. And so what we're trying to do is build that model and allow that to provide guidance for anybody who wants to deliver this information to other schools and universities.
Yeah, I would just add to that that as we are Intuit and other folks like Intuit in the space are looking to contribute in a way to this, the financial wellness in higher ed, having a centralized focus area like this is super helpful for us to be able to say, hey, we may not be the right person for cognitive awareness, but man, we can crush building out some things for debt credit and financial obligations management. So just having that central repository, I think, is super helpful for outside organizations so that when we contribute, we're contributing in tandem to HEFWA, in tandem to NEFI, in tandem to others that are supporting the same work. So another question, is this intended to be a stepped approach or is each area individually experienced?
If I'm understanding that question correctly,
It's like, is this a linear experience? Like you start with one, move to two, three, four, or is it individually?
no, it's individually asynchronous is probably the way I would phrase it. Like these are all going to happen at different times. We're trying to make this generic enough in the sense of that this can be applicable to any student, no matter what demographic they're coming from. I was talking with somebody about this yesterday. We're like, we've got some students who need more help on the budgeting side of things. We've got more students who need help on the financial aid side of things. And we're trying to make it so that a student can place focus where they need to relative to what their goals are at that moment. And so we know that students are going to experience each of these things at different times. What I would say is like 1 and 4 are probably going to be the one, actually, the first one is going to be the one that's going to be like you're going to have to do that anyway. That's applicable to everybody. 2, 3, and 4 are all going to come at different times.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe removing
Yeah,
the numbers so it doesn't look as linear. That's a great suggestion, but
it's
thanks for that.
not bad feedback at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, just some bullets on there.
Yep.
Jody asks or mentions, what about merging finances with another person or partner as part of the competencies? I think totally makes
I
sense. I can't remember if any of that is included in here.
You said it was like merging
Yeah,
finances.
like I'm getting married. Am I
Yep.
prepared to have those conversations and be able to merge in a way that is productive for both sides?
Oh, what a relevant topic. That's happening to me in 10 days, so I have to start getting ready to merge my finances.
Are you
So I
financially well in that, Phil?
I am certainly knowledgeable of it. I think, capable of it. Ooh, well, I am not sure yet. I think that's another one that might fit into that first domain as it relates to that cultural relational context. We were really focused on the idea of relationship finances. Now, again, like because of how you're asking that and the fact that we've heard this from a couple other people, it might mean we need to bring it a little bit more to the forefront to make sure that it's like really out there and specifically defined, but we know that that's part of this as we're building it out. So I like the fact that there's a call to it as well.
Yep. We've got a couple more minutes, a couple other comments here. Comparison is a huge in many conversations I navigate with students. So social media has such an impact. Would this also be included with the influence section? So just preparing students to be able to manage kind of the expectations of the world they live in.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting from a social media perspective. And again, like these are great comments because they're helping me think about like how should we put these together. So in this case of like social media and finances, there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, that could fit into financial influences in decision making. But there's a component of it as well that's informed financial consumer, right? Because what we want to make sure is that people understand what's a reputable source and what's not a reputable source. And so some of that is social as it relates to its people in your own life, but some of it is also people you don't know who are just spitting out information to you. And you have to determine whether or not it's a good thing that you should involve yourself with or not. So I actually think there's a little bit of components in each of them. We just need to figure out how exactly that's going to work and how to frame it in both those categories.
Yep. That did come up at some of the sessions that we initially had in the creation of these. As mentioned, we had a number of student affairs folks that were there that were really representing the voice of the student, and a lot of their input was around some of that comparison and how do we prepare them for that. So great call out there.
Yep.
A couple other just comments. Will this be available as a resource? Phil, you can kind of talk about what that might look like down the line.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we're getting ready to launch this next month. Shameless self-promotion time, by the way. Our annual conference will be next month at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Information there. And this is where we're going to roll out the competencies and what they look like. What's going to end up happening is we'll have some marketing information about what the competencies are, what it looks like from a level standpoint, and just provide some overall guidance as to what these competencies are going to look like. The plan of attack from there is basically to start rolling out some tools and resources that universities can use to help implement these competencies or help teach them at their schools. And they'll come from both us and then some of our partners as well. But what we're also going to be doing is taking the competencies, identifying a few different pilot institutions, and start researching the student success aspect of teaching these competencies to those students. And again, the idea is that we're going to be able to see by teaching these student success measures are going to go up or they're going to improve. And it'll provide leverage for us to be able to build even more tools and resources to address these competencies in an even grander way. So that's sort of the scale out of the next year or so.
Yeah, and to a couple of the comments here, I think the long-term vision that Phil has shared and that certainly Intuit is in support of is finding a way to assess and measure this to allow schools to not just implement the resources, but also then be able to prove the impact of the programs on campus. And so that means like, yes, measuring to the levels of the competency, but ideally down the line, and I'm throwing this out there because we're going to need partners in this. How do we measure the impact of students reaching those competencies on things like retention, graduation, degree progression, other areas that really do drive the funding for financial wellness programs on campuses? So, just something to keep in mind if you have interest in that. I would certainly send you to Phil first. Because as we think about what is the long-term vision of this, we definitely want to be a part of that measurement and measurement that makes a difference for how you all are operating on campus and being able to kind of prove how valuable this type of work is. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one other thing I'll really point out too is that in this case, because we've had this question come up in the focus groups that we've had, we're not like, we're going to try and do some research about effective methods of delivering financial education, but in no way is this competency set trying to dictate how things should be taught. So like we subscribe that there are instances where the curricular model works really well for implementing this. Co-curricular also works really well. We just want to make sure that there's guidance and then resources behind it to help institutions best deliver this information for how they think it's going to, most effectively reach their students.
cool. So I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the chat here, but I appreciate you guys' response to this. Couple other things. It looks like there's some links posted. Expand taxes content to include tax smart steps to build wealth. I love that. We did talk a lot about wealth building in
Yep.
some of that. Phil, I don't know if you have any comments just more generally on that as kind of a focus, not just financial survival, but really financial wealth building.
I mean, it's going to be included in this tax and income reporting, certainly. And then you get into like investing, retirement readiness, and speculative risk boundaries. That's also going to address some of those issues there as well.
Perfect. Suggestion: what if the cultural and relational context topic title was modified perhaps to use the word community to underscore all the important emphasis on perspective beyond the individual? For example, community and cultural context.
I like that, Caleb. Let's make a note of that and have a discussion
Yeah.
about it when we meet next.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, we're wrapping up today. Again, thank you, Phil, for
Yeah.
sharing this, all the work that you've put into it. I think the chat shows in lots of different ways
Yeah.
that folks are excited about this. We're excited to be a part of it, certainly at Intuit. Would love to see folks at HEFWA, the conference
Yep.
there in Charlotte, to share more. This, again, is, I think, the very early phases of this. So your feedback is crucial. And, again, just thanks to Phil. We have
Mhm.
I guess, Phil, before we move on here, any last
Yeah.
comments from you?
No, I mean the thing that I'll say is, again, we're taking feedback here. We're releasing this next month. I think there's going to be a national survey as well to ask people for feedback too on these competencies. So this won't be the only time you'd be able to provide feedback. So just know that we might be reaching out soon through our various channels, including Intuit here, to find out what more we could be doing. Because I do want to point out, like, we're really happy with what we've built so far. We know it's never really going to be complete. It's always going to need feedback. It's always going to need updating. So please, as we build this out, this is a community-wide effort. Let us know what it is we can be doing to really support you in the work that you're doing.